So today we are going to wrap up statutes. Going to look at free sources for statutes, do a quick review, then we will go over assignment 2. Thank you all for submitting your assignment 1. You should have all received the confirmation. So we'll review assignment 2 and then finish the federal statutes workshop. So our statutes review hopefully will work well with your finishing up the federal statutes workshop. Okay, so free availability of codes, and we're mostly interested in codes because we're talking about statutes, and of course we know codes are where we're going to find the statutes as they exist up to date. So we're interested in where we might find codes available for free, and of course the obvious reasons to find it for free is it's for free. However, as we will see, the features available are not nearly as robust as what we see with our annotated codes, especially on Lexis Westlaw, also Bloomberg, but not quite as much as we've seen, and even in good old-fashioned print. So what I have highlighted here, I keep on referring to it, is the class web links here on our Twin course page. And actually I'm going to go back because what I have done is organized it by our overall segments of the course. So we have folder for secondary sources, which we talked about. Here's the sources of the law handout that I spent the first class on statutes. So if you need to refer back to that and you're not finding the piece of paper, it's here. We also have it actually in the handout rack up in the library. And here's the folder for our statutes link. And this is where you will find the sites that I am going to take a look at now. There's lots else here. If you start to get confused what's what, email me and I'll let you know which one's the right one. Hopefully it's pretty straightforward. So the first one we're going to look at is the U.S. code at FDsys. FDsys is the government printing office. It's the official site. And actually we looked at this very briefly when we were talking about the U.S. code and first got introduced, because just like the U.S. code in print, the U.S. code at the government publishing office is only up to date up through 2013. Remember the supplement 1 that we saw, the big red volumes, and there was the big red volume for the 2012 edition, and then there was the big red volume for supplement 1. Well, supplement 1 took us through 2013, and of course, as we said, Congress has done some things in 2014. Obviously, you can debate the politics of how much and whether it was good or bad, but nonetheless, you need to know it, whatever you think about it. So FDsys, good if you have historical reasons to go back to the code. Actually, that would be the only reason. If you need to know what the U.S. code said in 2006, this is the place to come. And you might need to know that if an issue comes up and for whatever reason the law that applies to your client is the 2006 law, not the current one. Unusual circumstance for sure, so unusual that you would need to come here. Next site, actually let me go back to our class web links. Next site, and this is where I would recommend you go, is the U.S. code at the House of Representatives homepage. And the reason I recommend you go here is that this is searchable. However, one of the drawbacks to relying online, as well as to doing a live demo, is you sometimes experience that the web page is not available. The U.S. House website, at least from my attempts, have not been available all day. And various different pages. If you all are on Twin and link on it and get to it, let me know. But my guess is you're going to get this lovely page as well. However, all is not lost. Have I talked about the Wayback Machine at all? I was going to do this later in the semester, but now seems a good time because we're going to use it. Or actually, I already have used it. The Wayback Machine is also called the Internet Archive. And if you're interested, I'll explain the why it's called the Wayback Machine after class. It has to do with an old cartoon. Anyway, the Internet Archive, aka the Wayback Machine, it takes pictures. It crawls the web and takes pictures of web pages and stores them. So we're talking about gazillions of web pages. We're way beyond billions and trillions and whatever it comes after trillions. And they store them. So you can go back and look at a web page as it existed in the past and no longer does. So for instance, you could look and see what Hofstra's web page looked like in like 2005, if you were interested. We're not going to do that. However, it occurred to me, it's like, okay, I can't get to the house website, and it really kind of stinks to talk about a web page without showing you the web page. And then I thought, wait a minute, maybe the web archive, the Internet Archive, has it stored from a prior time that we can access. And sure enough, what you see up here, you see it says Internet Archive Wayback Machine. I'll show you how this operates. Actually, it's pretty straightforward later on in the course when we talk about web resources. But anyway, I went back to January 7th, 2015, not too long ago, and was able to find it. So that's my little anecdote about the Wayback Machine. A really, really useful tool to know about whatever you're doing on the web. If, for instance, the web page isn't available, or if there's another reason why you really need to see what the page looked like in the past.
Yeah, and the links will work on there too?
Some of them, not all of them. For instance, we can't search, but I should be able to link to, for instance, these links work. It's hit or miss. There's any sort of functionality like searching won't work because you need to go to the actual, if the page isn't working,
Right.
which is my problem, at least. As I said, I tried it on this computer. I don't know if you all have tried it. I'm pretty sure just the house web page is down for the day. Okay, so that's the Wayback Machine. Here is the United States Code at the House homepage, ushouse.gov. And again, that link, not the Wayback Machine, but the actual house.gov link, here's the site. It's uscode.house.gov. That link is on the Twen site, class web links in the statutes folder. And this is what it'll look like once it's working again, minus this stuff up top. And you will be able to search, but the search, as you can imagine, is not nearly as sophisticated as we get on Lexis Westlaw or even Bloomberg. But you can certainly browse. Unfortunately, I can't give you an example of the search, but I'm sure you can do that and navigate your way through. Here's the advanced search, which I believe the link does work even though we're on the Wayback Machine. So you can do general search time. You can search in a particular title. So if you know the title, but like you know it's the tax title, but you don't know where, or you know it's the labor title and you don't know where, that's actually a fairly useful tool. You can do that on Lexis Westlaw Bloomberg as well. Various fields, search for references for. So the advanced search is decent, but again, not quite as sophisticated. So I guess I would use any of these free resources, even for searching, if I just need to, especially if I already know my section and I just need to check it, see what it says. I probably feel pretty comfortable going to either the house code or the house code and reading the language and being fairly confident that that's what it actually says. If I'm doing any substantial amount of research, I of course want my best friend, the annotated code, for the notes of decisions and the references to secondary sources, which of course you don't get here. Okay, so that's the house code, another free source. I'm a big fan of the Legal Information Institute as a legal portal. A portal, of course, just being a place to find links to other places. And the Legal Information Institute is, as you can see, put together by Cornell Law School, so a reputable site. It's been around for a really, really long time. Not that that makes it good, but it's been around and I've used it for a long time and have learned to trust it over time. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a search capability just for the U.S. Code. You can search all of the Legal Information Institute, but you can get there quickly by title and section, as you can see. So again, I might go here if I know my section already. One thing you want to be very aware of with all of these sites is how up to date. For instance, we noticed on the GPO on the GPO site, it only goes through 2013. We would want to take a look and make sure that what the date is. Actually, one of the reasons I like both the House Code site as well as LII is that they do incorporate the laws through the current year. And again, I'm not sure we're going to be able to navigate there because of the, but here's a currency and updating here. Let's see if it works. So it's current through almost, with additional updates, so it's almost through the end of 2014, which will be interesting, as you will see in a moment. And LII will tell you its currency as well. Okay, any questions about access to the federal code for free, or why you would want to do that? I mean, obviously, if you're in a place that has either Lexis or Westlaw or Bloomberg, and either Lexis or Westlaw, it's part of your plan, then not so much reason to go there, although you still want to be conscious of your usage. But it's nice and easy to get to, and those are two reliable sources. Okay, for state codes, actually, again, the Legal Information Institute has a listing by jurisdiction. If you go here to get the law, you'll see where I found those links. So there's the U.S. Code link, and there is law by jurisdiction. So you see here state law is actually another place to find uniform laws we talked about last time. And this is where you find the link to the state codes. I like this particularly as opposed to Googling New York Code or New York Legislature, because sometimes you Google that and you have to go through a bunch of results before you actually find what you're looking for. And this is just a couple of clicks. Now, there's nothing wrong with Googling, but as I said, I happen to find, and this also gives me all of New York legal materials, not just the code. And one of the things you need to know about New York, which is so here it gives you a link to New York statutes. Which is a little tricky. And this is going to be the problem with any portal or even with the Google searches. You don't know where the link is going to get you, which is why you have to actually know a little bit. And part of that is knowing that you can find the New York Code. It's actually at the New York Assembly website. And again, I have the link here on the course homepage under class web links, and here's actually the consolidated laws, and there's actually a search functionality here. So that's New York. Otherwise, you would have to navigate your way through LII and try to find it that way. And so it brings you here, and this is actually more for bills rather than for the actual statutes. So I don't know why they give you that link. Obviously, you would need to know to go to the New York Assembly site and navigate your way that way. So maybe I'm undercutting my argument for the LII, at least for New York. Usually it's a pretty good site. Let's actually take a look. Here's another portal site. We actually looked at this site when we were talking about finding secondary sources for aspects that are, for issues that are regulatory, going to usa.gov and finding the topic. But there's also state government webpage portal here. And so let's see what they do for New York. So we can do a little compare and contrast. There's New York. Okay, Okay, so that brings us to the official New York site. So again, you'd have to navigate your way through, go to government. So under legislative, again, so you'd have to know it was under the New York State Assembly site. So maybe actually New York might be an example where Googling is better, because if Google has it categorized to take you to the Assembly site, you know, they make things spiffier, but they make things harder to find sometimes when they make things spiffier. This is a new and improved Assembly site, and they used to have just, it was not very sophisticated in terms of web presence, but you could click on New York laws. Now you'd have to go first here and then go to New York state laws, and then you'd get to this site. So I don't know what that tells you, other than you have to know a little bit about your state sometimes. Maybe easier in other states, but we like to make things difficult in New York. I can say that because I grew up here. Okay, so that's basically codes, and the LII site, the USA Gov site, would be a place to get to other states, again, for free with all the caveats that I already mentioned. Any question about statutes, codes for free online? Okay, so then let's step back and sort of review where we've been. So we first started with our sources of the law handout. I'm going to pull that up again, class web links. That's not in the statutes folder, by the way, because it covers all different areas of the law, not just statutes. So this is going to be a good place for you to get a refresher about what things are called in the nomenclature. We went a lot over session laws versus chapter laws versus public laws. Session laws, the generic, chapter laws, New York, public laws, federal. They're all the same thing, just different names, kind of like soda, Coke, and Pepsi. Generic and then brand names. You want to know how to go back and forth between the session law section and the code section, and probably more importantly, you want to remember that there is a huge difference between the session law section and the code section. Remember, the session law is as it was passed at a particular point in time. The code is arranged by topic and will tell you what the law is as it is today, so it will incorporate all of the amendments that might have happened over the course of many different session laws. And again, hopefully the sources of the law helps to remind you of that. So for federal, our favorite Table 3, again, linked under statutes, and I basically call it the Public Law U.S. Code Section Translation Table, and here you see the reference to Table 3. Again, this is going to wind up taking us to one of these, most likely. You can try reloading it, but as of half an hour ago it didn't work, so I'm not optimistic. But here's what it looks like from the Wayback Machine, and it still looked that way last time I got to it. So again, if you have the public law section, so we're talking federal only, Table 3 only works for federal laws. So if you have the public law number and the year, you can navigate to, and again, I'm not sure if it's going to work because we're through the Wayback section, but if we went to 1974, which is there, which is when ERISA was initially passed. As I said, I have no idea. Okay, so far so good. So we know it's 9, and again, you need to know the year and the public law number, 93406. Amazingly, I remember that. And so here you see that translation. Again, you see the dramatic difference between the Act section, so the ERISA Act, those sections and how they get translated into the code. Title 29, the Labor Code, and the different sections here. And again, if we remembered that 514 is preemption, we would see it's Title 29, Section 1144. So again, remember the concept most importantly. If you don't remember how to do the translation, ask a reference librarian, ask me, that's fine. But remember the difference. That's going to be the key. Remember, we saw in that news article, in the New York Times article, they keep on referring to the Voting Rights Act. But they're referring to the Voting Rights Act and this is Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, but they're referring to it as it exists today, not as it existed in 1965 or 8, whenever it was passed. So even popular news, they refer to the Act section, even though that was back in 1965. You want to know what the code section is to see what it is today, which is usually what you need to see when you're talking about the law. Okay. Now sometimes you need to go the other way. You need to go from the code back to the public law and the public law section, and that's what we will need to do when we talk about legislative history starting next time. And that, as we saw in our annotated codes, so here we are on Westlaw, and I'll show you Lexis and Bloomberg in a moment. So here we are on Westlaw, good old section 1144. We scroll down to what Westlaw calls the credits, what I call the parenthetical, because it's got a little parentheses there, and sure enough, 1144 was initially acted, surprise, surprise, Public Law 93-406, and then here are all the amendments. So it was last amended by Public Law 109-280. And it even tells us the title. And remember, the title in the public law is a subject area, and that's a different use of the word title than when we talk about Title 29 of the U.S. Code, which is the subject area of labor in the U.S. Code. Okay. And of course, if you have a popular name, there are popular names tables. We saw that, and there was a link at the U.S. Code site. Popular name tool. Okay, they call it a tool, not a table, but anyway. And there are popular name tables, as you saw last time, in state statutes. You can find that, obviously, you saw it in the books after Z in the index. If you go on Westlaw, basically the way to navigate to both the popular name table on Westlaw, and you could also Google it. A lot of times, if you type in New York lemon law, you're likely to find it. But if you don't, so I'll go to New York, I'll go to statutes, and obviously this would also work for any other state. You go to that state, you go to statutes, and once you get to the statutes portion, you'll get to the index here, and you will get to, there's the popular name table. And it'll work the same for the other statutes as well as federal statutes as well. So that's how you get to it on Westlaw. Let's take a quick look at Lexis. Now Lexis doesn't have the index yet, but taking a look at Lexis, we can find the parenthetical. In Lexis, it's called the history. You can scroll down, or you can use jump to, and then say history, if you remember that, or just scroll down, and again, you see the same parenthetical. Both in Lexis and Westlaw, you can also probably, if you know the popular name, just type it in. ERISA, Employee Retirement, Voting Rights Act, and it'll likely navigate you there as well. And Bloomberg, again, what's interesting about Bloomberg is over here on the right, general information, obviously we know the citation because that's what we pulled up, but it actually gives us the translation. So a gold star for Bloomberg. They didn't used to do that. Or if you want to see the entire, here's public law. All it's doing is it's just pulling it from the parenthetical, which isn't in a parenthetical. So one minus sign for Bloomberg there. Actually, that doesn't really matter. But again, below the text of the statute, after the end of the text of the statute, you'll see the credit, history, parenthetical without the parentheses, whatever you want to call it. Okay. Finding a relevant statute, of course, secondary sources is going to be a good place to go. That's how we learned about ERISA preemption in section 1114. Probably, if I had given you the time to read some of those secondary sources, you might have also read about another possibly relevant federal statute, 1132. We didn't really get to see that in the secondary, but you would have discovered it in one of them there. So I would say secondary sources definitely up there if you don't know anything about the area. once you start to know about the areas, so once you start to know about ERISA and preemption, then keyword searching. Remember, statutes use controlled vocabulary. The legislators sit down and choose their words very carefully. So in our ERISA preemption example, they use supersedure, and they don't use the word preemption in the actual text, as I've mentioned to you many times. So when you're first starting your statutory research, you may feel like you're having a lot of trouble finding a relevant statute. Don't give up and think, oh, there's nothing relevant. Understand that maybe you just don't know the right words to use yet. That's one of the big advantages of searching in an annotated code, because using the word preemption, a lot of the notes of decision use preemption, some of the secondary sources references within the annotated code use preemption. So if you're using that search term, Lexis, Westlaw, even Bloomberg might pull it up even though the actual text doesn't use preemption. Obviously, if you have the popular name, we talked about pulling up a statute that way. And last and definitely not least, as I made reference to let's go back here, to different related sections, is the table of contents. You want to look, if you're doing statutory research and you find a section close, maybe that's not even great, look at the table of contents. I would say always look at the table of contents, even if you do it for 2 minutes and say, all right, this is a waste of time. Because, A, you might find another section that's better, or at least another one that's important and relevant, and B, you want to look for those definition sections. Again, statutes are based on words, and if the words are defined by statute, you need to know that. We talked about that a couple classes ago. We don't see that listed in this part now because ERISA is such an involved piece of legislation. The definition sections often wind up in the beginning. We're in part 5, so we might want to just go back and see. You can either just sort of click and guess, you can search. So if we go to the table of contents and search headings, and you may not find one, but definitely want to make sure you find it if it exists. So we didn't find it searching this way. I would browse through. I just find that more effective, and see if it's there and where it might be. Actually, I'm pretty sure there is one. So another way to find it, actually, would be to search the subchapter. So I've highlighted the subchapter, and I would just search for definitions. Actually, I've highlighted the subchapter, and there it is right there. So that's another way to do it. And obviously, a more successful way. And of course, never forget, annotated code is our friend. So here in the definition sections, just because I have it up, whichever annotated code you're in, Lexis, Westlaw, Bloomberg, remember that this is there. If you need cases, if you need to interpret or find out a particular interpretation of a particular section or sections, remember that the notes of decisions are there. Remember that we have this context and analysis for additional secondary sources, additional guidance on what this section talks about. We also talked about shepherdizing or key citing, and this turns out to be very interesting. I found a section that was updated by Public Law 114-1. Anybody remember what that means? 114 is the Congress. We just started the 114th Congress. Remember, Congresses are numbered back from one in 1789. They last 2 years. So 2015 starts with the 114th Congress, just the way the numbers work. And -1 is just the first public law that was passed. But since the Congress just started, there aren't too many. Actually, I think we're up to 2 at the moment. So I found a section that was updated by 114-1. And notice what Westlaw is doing, and we'll look at Lexis and Bloomberg in a moment, is it's telling us, hey, look, there's enacted legislation, go take a look. Because if we remember to update, and update, even online, if we go to currentness, notice it's only current through laws approved in the 113th Congress through the end of 2014. So it doesn't include Public Law 114-1, because 114-1 was passed in 2015, sometime in beginning of January. So, moral of this story, two morals. First and foremost, update, and update. Second moral, be bibliographically aware. Look at the screen and say, what's it saying? Oh, look, yellow flag, enacted legislation. That could be interesting. I need to look at that. It turns out what this legislation does is it extends some deadline, which could be very important, because if you're reading the old deadline thinking, oh, the deadline's passed, you'd be wrong. Okay, let's see what it looks like on Lexis. So there's the very same section. Lexis puts the current note right up top so you don't have to click on anything, but again, notice only to the December 2014. So in our updating, Lexis hasn't incorporated this, and of course you have no way of knowing in advance. I'm telling you because I figured this out, but you won't know when you're looking at a section. And what Lexis does for us here on the side is it's got, again, a nice little yellow signal here, pending legislation, which, if you ask me, isn't as obvious as enacted legislation. However, if you see pending legislation, especially with a yellow doodad there, you gotta click on it. I would click, if it said pending, I would look at it anyway, because what Lexis will now at least do for me, us, you, is, okay, so here's the legislation. That actually HR stands for a bill, 2015, but it tells us the status here. This is they put it here kind of tucked away on the side. This is the important part. That's enacted. That means it's law. That means I have to look at this because what I'm looking at on Lexis is out of date, because that's only current through 2014, and this got enacted in 2015. So you've got to be a little more aware again on Lexis. Bloomberg, over here on the right where it tells us current through Public Law 114-1. So actually Bloomberg just incorporates it. Interesting, Bloomberg's more up to date than Lexis and Westlaw, at least in this case. However, I would actually have to see, and maybe I'll do this next time, there's now a 114-2. I don't know if Bloomberg has incorporated that. I don't know what section that is in yet. But you'd want to look at that currency. Any questions? Okay, so that's the real quick review, sort of everything we've been doing for the last several classes in 15 or 20 minutes. What I'm going to do is distribute assignment 2. And again, this is available on the course website. So the print is really just for you to take a look at now. I'm not going to spend quite as much time with it because it pretty much follows the same pattern as assignment 1. Again, never, ever hesitate if you've got any questions. The what do you mean by, what do you want with, a few of you emailed me questions on assignment 1, and I'm glad you did. Thank you for that. Again, remember to answer all of the questions. I haven't seen your assignments 1 yet, so I don't know if you've all taken me at my word on that, but be very careful to answer every question. Basically, for this assignment, what I'm going to do, as you can see in question Roman numeral 1, I'm going to ask you to look back at what you did in assignment 1 and list the most relevant New York and federal statutory sections you found. Now, you looked in a bunch of different secondary sources, encyclopedias, treatises, law reviews. Just choose one of those, whichever one seemed the most relevant at the time. So take a look at your Word document and pull out a federal section and that you think is most relevant, and a state, and a New York section from whichever secondary source you found. And let me know where you found it. And then you'll go through for section A, using all three services. What I strongly suggest you do is go through all of the questions for one service, and so start with whichever one you want. Start with Bloomberg if you want to go alphabetically. Answer all the questions, and then go to Lexis, and then go to Westlaw. Obviously, you can do it in whatever order you want. You don't have to follow that, but I would suggest it'll just be less confusing. So in your answers, just give me Bloomberg. You can bold it or whatever, and then A1 through 9. I am going to ask you in Part B to go to the print, so you will need to be here in the library for part of it. Again, if you get confused, welcome to ask me, welcome to ask the reference librarian. For those 6 questions. And then on Part C, I asked you to look at what you put down, what you found in your secondary sources, and compare them to what you find in Roman numeral 2, which is your searches online and in print. Part 3, we move on to federal codes. And here, just because you're getting experience and you don't need just want to have you see Bloomberg law, since we do that less, and either Lexis or Westlaw. Since Lexis and Westlaw are fairly similar, I strongly suggest you use your least favorite, because while you're in class, you might as well get practice with that, since I'm sure your favorite one you use a lot. But obviously I can't, that's up to you. And so I ask you to search and state the sections and then answer the questions. Again, describing your searches, this you did all in assignment 1. I ask you in Part B to use one of the free code services. Hopefully the U.S. code will be at the house will be back up and running at some point in the next 2 weeks. If it's not, we'll figure something out. But I suspect it'll be up in the next day or 2. And then I ask you to compare your results with what you found and put down in Part 1 in the secondary sources. And then Part 4, I ask you to give me a good research strategy for researching and utilizing annotated codes. I want you to be specific regarding references from the secondary sources. So let me know, hey, the encyclopedias were great, the treatises, I got the best reference from the encyclopedias. And then particular features in the annotated code that would be useful. Any questions? Again, please ask if you're confused either about the substance of how to do the research or how I phrase the question. I really do try hard to make it as clear as possible, but human communication can be difficult, and what seems very clear to me might not be at all clear to you, so please ask. Okay, let's then dive into the remainder of our Federal Annotated Code workshop. Does anybody need a new copy? Okay. There you go, short arms. Anybody else? You? Hi. So, for those of you, those of you who have your copy from last time, you'll all be starting at different sections, so just proceed on. One thing I want to mention before we dive back in is exam scheduling. I'm still waiting to hear from everybody, but I am tentatively looking at Monday. Is it Monday or Tuesday? Yeah, Monday the 4th and Tuesday the 5th. From what you've all responded, you may have a conflict with one of those days, but not both. So obviously you don't show up for both. You would show up for whichever day you want to or can take the exam that day, and then the other people would show up on the other day. And again, I'll talk the entire class on the exam and review exactly how it's all going to work in that class. I will, so tentatively write down those dates, and I will confirm with you next class, because that'll be it. I will have made it official. Okay, let's do the workshop. So I'll give you all a minute to refresh your memories where you were or start again. So I want my copy.
We'll work together if you'd like to do that.
Wade, speak up if you got a question. Well, you won't be able to check the popular name table online because that's not working. So I would say try the Westlaw one for Lexis, which is, let's see, Lexis hides it. Lexis does have it, it's a little funkier to find, but if you want to find it on Lexis, I'll walk you through it. You have a, you will, Westlaw or Lexis? West. Okay, so, if you need help, let me know, excuse me.
This is from Thursday?
This was
This
two
was
classes
Thursday,
ago.
yeah.